comes to personal matters, such as matters of health, we should take the high ground. We take the high ground. So we wish our Prime Minister best wishes and our hope for a speedy recovery. Today I'll be talking on the question of crime. And we see there a lot of an ex-senator's daughter shot dead. And as we turn the pages, we see a number of disturbing issues related, a burnt body found in a back seat, a number of issues related to crime. And we note that as we speak, the Minister of National Security has recorded 1,000 plus murders since he assumed office. And we will be indicating later on in this news conference that we have a viable crime plan. And we are guaranteeing that in 5 years' time, our annual murder rate will be reduced to under 400 murders. It is now manifestly clear that Keith Christopher Rowley, Fitzgerald Ethelbert Hines, and the entire band, and here I'm using Eric Williams' words, and I quote, of miscreants, obscurantist politicians, and benighted idiots, end of quote, who now form the cabinet, have abandoned their sacred responsibility to provide for our safety and security. Fitzgerald Ethelbert Hines let the secret out of the bag when he said that his job was not to provide for our safety and security. He misspoke. Now we know that it was not him alone, but the entire cabinet that has left us to our own devices on crime. Rowley has no crime plan, no plan of action, no master plan to deal with crime, only bluster and BS. Rowley does not even pretend anymore to fool us into believing that some mysterious P&M crime plan exists somewhere in the firmament. And failing any sensible initiatives from this government, only God can save us from being random victims. This year we are headed for 700 murders. Another murder record waiting to be broken under this clueless administration. And if we extrapolate further, by the time this Duncy head administration demits office in 2025, we will reach 1,000 murders annually. Now when Dr. Rowley assumed office in 2015, the murder rate was only 420. When they demit office in 2010-25, it may well be 1,000 plus murders. Under Keith Christopher Rowley, we have witnessed a string of shameful and appalling crime statistics. In January 2017, under Rowley, we recorded 52 murders. 1 year later, in January 2018, it was 60. 1 year later, 2019, it was 41. 46 in 2020. 2021, because of COVID, we had only 25 murders. And last year, in 2022, it jumped up in January to 52 murders. So if in January last year, with the highest annual murder rate, we had 52 murders, and this January we have 9 more than last year, you can see where we are headed. We are in deep, deep trouble. Since Ethelbert Hines assumed office on April 19, 2021, we have to date recorded a shameful 1,017 murders under his watch. With 1,017 murders under Hines's belt, Dr. Rowley must come clean and tell us if he is satisfied with the performance of Fitzgerald Ethelbert Hines as National Security Minister. He must tell us. Don't duck, Dr. Rowley. Don't hide. Don't dance. Don't obfuscate. No fancy bullying utterances. Tell us with a straight and honest face whether you are satisfied with the performance of your Minister of National Security. How many PNM Ministers of National Security will you appoint only for us to find out in the fullness of time that they are all incompetent? Is Dr. Rowley's cabinet devoid of talented persons who can diversify our economy? Or fix roads and bridges? Or retool our education system to meet the requirements of the 21st century? Or provide scanners for our ports? Or effectively patrol our borders? Or provide body cams to help monitor interactions between the TTPS and the citizenry? Or CCTVs to help us in our fight against crime? Or even successfully pursuing cases in our courts so that we do not have to pay alleged accused murderers 20 million plus in compensation. My colleague will deal with that more comprehensively. Shame on Dr. Rowley and his incompetent cabinet. How many bogus crime schemes will you concoct to fool us into believing that you have some clue about what to do about crime? You have none, plain and simple, Dr. Rowley. No plan, no crime strategy. You cannot even fool a 4th standard primary school pupil that you have one. You are merely treading water in the hope that some passing ship will rescue you. So, we have some questions. Whatever became of the committee established by Dr. Rowley last July to deal with crime as a public health emergency? Has that committee ever met? Has it submitted an interim report? Was that all a hoax to buy time? What about the Watkins report? Has its recommendation seen the light of the day? And if they have they impacted on our crime situation? And whatever became of the latest scheme to hoodwink us, the vaunted consultations on crime? Has any consultation been convened? Any contemplated? Everything under Fitzgerald Hines speaks to chaos, mismanagement, blunder after blunder, and VAPs. Are all national security arms under Hines working 24/7 to protect us? Can Hines effectively manage our national security apparatus? Every day we read about bullets with TT regiment markers being found at crime scenes. Every day. Police officers and Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard officers before the courts. Are they being properly recruited and effectively managed? We, on this side, do not blame the many hard-working officers of our national security arms. But where are the policies to ensure that the guns and ammunition provided by the state do not end up in the hands of the few bad apples and rogue police officers or criminals? Why is the long-promised report on the shooting of the Venezuelan baby by the Coast Guard officers? Where's that report? The Canadians have long since completed the paperwork to grant the mother relocation status. But here in Trinidad, we will forever await an official report on the incident involving the death of her child. You raise the matter in Parliament only to be punished by Hines' vacuous diatribe. We witnessed in the 2020 budget 287 million being allocated to the SSA. In the media review, an additional 66 million was given to the SSA on top of that 287 million figure. And in the final review of the budget weeks ago, 32 million of the 66 million was deducted from the SSA's budget. What is that? Budgeting? Or more correctly, bookkeeping by an engineer posing as a financial wizard? Could the requirements of the SSA not be budgeted for in the original 2020 budget? We witnessed 32 million being unspent on CCTVs because contracts for this vital crime-fighting resource was not awarded. Imagine that. On Friday, the Parliament will debate the nomination of Mrs. Erla Christopher to fill the position of Commissioner of Police. We thank the outgoing President, Paula May Weeks, for finally, efficiently ensuring that the nomination was sent expeditiously to Parliament. Our caucus has not yet met to discuss the matter, and no decision has been taken regarding our position on the nomination. It is noted, however, that Mrs. Christopher, if appointed, will officially retire in May this year, after which she will be eligible according to Section 75 of the Police Service Act 2006 for an extension of 1 year in the first instance, and thereafter subject to annual review for a maximum of 2 further periods of 1 year each. Now, we note that this extension and these extensions are at the sole discretion of an incompetent cabinet. That raises the question of executive control over senior officers of the TTPS, dependent on cabinet's goodwill for contract extensions. As I have said, the party has taken no decision on Mrs. Christopher. All I would say to the Police Service Commission is that in future, they may wish to consider the ages of nominees in the context of a proper succession plan, and given well-performing COPs at least 5 uninterrupted years to fulfill their mandate. For information, we note that Mrs. Keechan Sewell, Commissioner of the NYPD, New York Police Division, has 35,000 plus officers. Well, Miss Sewell is 50 years old. Commissioner Brenda Lucky, head of Canada's RCMP, 56 years. Toronto, with only 5,000 police officers and twice our population, has less than 100 murders annually. And Myron Demkiv, chief of the Toronto Police Service, is only 50 years. And that is a matter for future consideration by the Police Service Commission. All we can say to Mrs. Erla Christopher is that if selected, she should always maintain her professionalism, her ethics, and a respectful arm's-length relationship with the Keith Rowley executive, bent on exercising absolute control over all our independent institutions. Our commissioners of police swear a sacred oath to uphold the Constitution and the law, and that should be their guiding principles at all material times. Now I turn to the UNC crime plan, and we give a commitment that it will reduce murders to under 400 annually in 5 years. That is the commitment we give. The UNC and our political leader have repeatedly articulated a results-oriented, measurable, and timely crime plan. And I'm not going into details, but I'm attaching it for the information we send to the media and the other persons who receive our summary of this presentation. Our crime plan is guaranteed to reduce the annual murder rate to under 400 in 5 years. Now think about that. Under the PNM, we may be headed for, in 2025, 2 years from now, to almost 1,000 murders. And we are saying, give us 5 years, and we will reduce it to 400. And we have a track record of reducing crime when we are in office. Our crime plan has repeatedly been ignored by the traditional media, so that they continue their PNM-inspired mantra that the UNC only criticizes, but never supplies alternative policies. Well, we have our policies. Justice Lucky once showed me one of my releases published in a newsletter of the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea in Hamburg, Germany, but totally ignored by our free press. It is what it is. We have and will continue to provide alternative plans to transform our economy, to increase foreign exchange, increase foreign direct investments, and to reduce crime. I will deal with only 3 items in our crime plan, since time is against me. It speaks to dividing the Ministry of National Security into 2 arms, namely, 1, internal or home affairs, security matters, inclusive of the TTPS, prison and fire service, immigration, etc. So that's one part, Home Affairs, Internal Security. And the second, the Ministry of Defense, inclusive of the Army, the Navy, and the Air Guard. So we are separating them into two distinct areas. It is clear that managing both arms is beyond Fitzgerald Hines. And so we are witnessing the collapse of both arms of national security remit, in large part due to mismanagement and incompetent leadership. Our crime plan provides each with a focused, professional, competent, and visionary leadership, so that when synergized, they will contribute effectively to our fight in crime and help us with our task of reducing crime to 400 annually. This is the way it is done in big countries. The separation of the arms of national security as we have now. This is the way it is done in the United Kingdom. This is the way it is done in Canada, in the United States, and also in small, well-managed countries. And an example is Singapore. A second aspect of our crime fighting plan is to review the composition of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service from an HR standpoint. And one of the things we have talked about is accelerating the promotion of high-performing officers. And secondly, and expects to achieve that 10% reduction. So you would tell, for example, the police service, we will give you cars, but tell us what you need, which is the end goal, to have a response time of 5 minutes. And if the police service tells us that they need 200 vehicles, we give them the 200 vehicles. Not willy-nilly, but tied to a outcome of a 5-minute response time if somebody reports a crime. This is consistent with COVID's ideal of beginning with the end in mind, i.e. setting the goals and working assiduously to achieve them. In conclusion, it is manifestly clear that Dr. Rowley's record on crime is monumentally abysmal. We just cannot go on this way. We must admit that we have a Minister of National Security who is clueless, inept, incompetent, and entirely out of his league. Let's stop making excuses, else all our children will be suffering from rampant crime. Stop making excuses. Call a spade. Plain talk, bad manners. We have a Prime Minister who is head of National Security Council and has virtually given up on crime, hoping against hope that God, a Trinity, will somehow, in his eternal grace, rescue us from the abyss of P&M despair. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we are in trouble. How does the ex-P&M senator whose daughter got shot, how does he feel? Dr. Rowley must recognize his limitations and that of his cabinet on the war on crime. Admit honestly that solutions are beyond you, Dr. Rowley. That you tried your best but did not succeed. And that the very future of our once blessed paradise is at stake. Dr. Rowley, if you are a man, if you love Trinidad, you should immediately fire Fitzgerald Ettenberg Hines. Bring in new talent into the cabinet, even from the diaspora. We have bright citizens willing to contribute. Somehow, Dr. Rowley does not see them or is not interested in competent people. So he has a cabinet of misfits and, as Eric Williams said, miscreants and obscurantist politicians. Failing a willingness to act decisively, Dr. Rowley, you must resign and call elections as soon as possible, lest citizens believe that you somehow are benefiting from turning a blind eye and giving criminals a free rein. Thank you, and I turn you over to my colleague, Senator Jayanti Lutchmedial.
Good morning again. Unfortunately, it is not a good day, and we haven't had many good days in Trinidad and Tobago in the last couple of months. For the last 7.5 years, I would say, but particularly in the last couple of months. We are now in a place where the state has, under the leadership and the guidance of Keith Rowley, Fitzgerald Hines, Faris Al-Rawi, and Reginald Armour. They are unable to prevent crime, they are unable to detect crime, they are unable to convict people even when they are charged for crimes, and then subsequently they are unable to defend the state against allegations of malicious prosecution. And so, on the heels of massive lawsuits being filed by persons who allege secret indemnity deals being given out to them, and big claims being made by these people who wish to benefit now and get a financial gain from the state and the taxpayer, facing that possibility of having to pay for the actions of those who held office as Attorney General. We are faced now with the bloodiest month that we've had in a long time, with 61 murders in 1 month to start the year. And we are faced now with news that the state is failing to defend the claims of malicious prosecution, and that persons who spent almost a decade behind bars awaiting trial, who could not be convicted by the state based on the evidence that they had in this very high-profile murder, are now going to be compensated by the taxpayer to the tune of some $20 million, because the state could not even put in a defense in this matter. I see that the Attorney General has called a press conference for this afternoon. I think they have gone since yesterday in hunt of a scapegoat, and so we will wait to hear which person or entity, whether they will blame Kamala, COVID, or somebody else for this epic and disastrous failure in the management of the legal affairs of the state by both Al-Rawi and Armour. Many people in this country had hope, including us, I think, that when Al-Rawi was removed from the office of the Attorney General after his many episodes of poorly drafted legislation and his historic losses in certain matters that were taken before the court involving appointment of police service commissioner and so on, that we would see brighter days in the management of the legal affairs of the state. But unfortunately, it got off to an astounding start, where you have an Attorney General who confined himself in Miami and from Europe to depose an affidavit that is untrue and simply brush it aside and face no consequences, and Rowley is sitting down and allowing these things to continue. They cannot even manage what is happening here in their own ministry, right under their noses. This is a level of incompetence that we have never seen under no administration, PNM or UNC, prior, in the management of the legal affairs in the office of the Attorney General. The only thing that I have ever heard that they boast about is that they condensed 3 ministries into one. They say the UNC had 3 ministries, but you know what? Under the 3 ministries managing the legal affairs of the state, you did not have anybody winning a matter undefended by the state for the tune of $20 million. You did not have people lining up outside the Forensic Sciences Center and waiting for sometimes up to 3 months for results to come back before they could bury their loved ones. You did not have the company's registry collapsing for months. Can you imagine the message it sends to foreign investors who wish to come here and they want to incorporate a company that nothing could be done for months because the system crashed under the watch of this Attorney General and a minister in the Ministry of Legal Affairs and the former Attorney General who should have been maintaining these things? These are critical aspects of the management of legal affairs and the systems that must work together hand in hand with national security and other agencies to ensure that the country can run. There is a reason why the Attorney General and the Prime Minister alone make up the cabinet, because the office of the Attorney General is so important. You cannot have a cabinet, you cannot run a country without an Attorney General, and I don't know what stroke of bad luck or what it is, what blight has fallen upon this country, that Rowley cannot find one competent person to fill the shoes and to fill that office of Attorney General. Not one. He has changed, and I don't know if we have gone from bad to worse. But I think that the root of this investigation that they have called for must start with Faris Al-Rawi, because it is under his watch that this matter was filed against the state. We now know that an appearance was entered, no defense was put in, and then they asked to be heard at the assessment of damages, but no evidence was filed to counter the evidence put forward on behalf of the accused persons who are saying that they were maliciously prosecuted by the state. My heart really and truly goes out to the family of Ms. Naipaul Kuhlman, because today, they, like everybody else in this country, must now sit and ask themselves, when the state cannot convict people after 10 years of them being in prison, are the real perpetrators still out there, roaming free? The monies that must be paid now by the state due to the incompetent mismanagement of civil litigation portfolio which falls under the Attorney General. How many more of our citizens must die because our agencies are under-resourced? How many more people who may be guilty of offences may walk free because the state is not putting resources into the TTPS, into the office of the DPP to secure convictions? How much millions of dollars? I see that Senior Counsel Israel Khan, who is part of the prosecution, identified that 3 senior counsel were retained to prosecute this matter. They could not secure a conviction. Why is that? We must go back to the root of this matter, because it is so important in a case like this. Every life matters, but this was a really it was one that gathered a lot of attention, and we must ask the question now whether or not the amount of attention given to a matter is the reason why perhaps corners are being cut. Is it that somebody stood to benefit by not ensuring a proper investigation? And you know what? We will never know, because Senior Counsel Khan says that in his opinion there was sufficient basis to charge these men. Whether you could have, even though you were unable to convince a jury at the end of the day, there was a sufficient basis. And the state had an opportunity to come forward and say, well, listen, even though the jury acquitted these 9 men, we had reasonable cause to believe, we had good grounds to arrest them, there was reasonable and probable cause to prefer those charges, the evidence was solid. We will never know. We will never know now what was the basis of charging these 9 men and keeping them behind bars in a justice system that is on its knees, crawling and creeping every day. The PNM will continue to make excuses after excuse, and none of those excuses hold any weight. The minute they open their mouth and they come out with some excuse, we as a responsible opposition, they say we don't support them and so on, but we point out to them why none of these excuses hold water. We point out to them what they are doing wrong. We ask them to take corrective action, and they refuse. I don't know if it is bravado and ego, or if it is just, as we say, simple, don't care, who dead, who live. I know that Fitzgerald Hines doesn't feel that the security and safety of citizens is not his responsibility. Well, it appears now that Amor, Al-Rawi, and at the end of the day, the buck stops with the Prime Minister. They don't seem to think that managing litigation and the litigation portfolio of the state is their responsibility either, because they have all abandoned ship and we are just left adrift. And I want to say that, MP Charles mentioned that only God could save us. Well, I want to say God could help those who help themselves. And it is time for the population to help themselves and get this administration out of office, because they have proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that they cannot save this country from going down the path of no return when it comes to crime and criminality. They have proven beyond the shadow of a doubt, I think, to many people that they simply do not care. Imagine we are facing 60 murders in the month of January. And MP Charles asked what about conversations that we're supposed to have on crime. I hear they put that for March. So we had 60 murders, 61 in the first month of January. Rowley waiting on what, another 60 people to die and then come out and have conversations? He will dress up and put on a stage with a few plants and things and sit down on his little couch and have conversations. What is that going to do? Is that going to bring comfort to the families of the 60 people who died in January and the further 60 that may die in February, waiting on you to have a conversation with them? Is that going to raise the detection rate of the TTPS, which is abysmal? Is that going to help the office of the DPP convict anybody who is actually arrested by the TTPS? Is it going to address the issue, the social issues, which are contributing to the rise in crime? Where is the plan? I say it time and time again until I am blue in the face. There are 3 phases to dealing with crime. You have prevention, you have detection and prosecution, and then you have rehabilitation. And unless you can tackle all 3 of them at the same time, then we are like hamsters on a wheel, all waiting to be the next victim. And that is how the majority of this population feels at the moment. Because you have a government shutting down industries like the scrap iron industry, where thousands of persons were employed, people who are on the lower ranks of earning capacity. So what you are doing now, you are taking bread out of the hands of people who have no other options to earn a living. And then you say, well, people are indisciplined and that's why we have crime and we're looking at crime. Your policies are contributing to crime. And why did you shut down an entire industry? Because you cannot police the society. A failure of enforcement is why an entire industry and thousands of people were thrown onto the breadline. You have proposed absolutely nothing that could help raise the detection rate. I think it was in 2021, they brought a bill to the parliament, and I remember saying very clearly, you must creep before you could walk, but this legislation is asking the TTPS to fly. It was in the wake of the horrific murders, and we had all the vigils taking place, and 2 young women having been murdered, and the country was crying out for justice. And we could hear nothing from the government. So they ran quickly and they brought 2 pieces of legislation to the parliament, which, contrary to the narrative that they tried to run, the opposition supported. One was the pepper spray legislation, which we had been clamoring for a very long time. And 2 was the evidence amendment bill to introduce all sorts of high-tech policies and procedures that they said would immediately attack the crime problem and lead to a rise in detection and conviction rates for the TTPS. I am asking the question today, how many people have been given permits to import pepper spray, to sell pepper spray, and has any single citizen of this country been able to arm themselves and protect themselves with the use of non-lethal weapons like pepper spray? How many? Give us these statistics. And I intend to file these questions in the parliament, and if I have to, through a freedom of information request as well, to get the answer. Because we know that they will dance around it and come up with all sorts of excuses why it didn't happen. We were promised that there was some big high-tech system being put in place in the TTPS to allow for rapid approvals and so on. Everything has fallen down. Every so often, you can't even get a certificate of character when you go to the police. Sometimes the system goes down for months at a time. If you go to the police station now to make a report, the police do not even have a book to issue you a receipt. They're writing it out on a file paper, a copybook page, and giving it to you. I commend the officers for trying to do something for the population. They are left hamstrung by an incompetent administration. Today in the newspaper they are reporting that a woman took the state to court and won in the Court of Appeal because they issue a summons sometime later for a traffic offence because the police don't have ticket books. But the government will try to convince you that they have brought legislation to allow for video recording of crime scenes. The first responder will come and record on the crime scene. Remember MP Charles? Real CSI Miami kind of thing they're coming with in the parliament to convince you that they are doing something to tackle crime. How many police stations have been outfitted with functional technology to improve detection, to improve conviction rates? They say the problem is that people can challenge with confessions when they get to the courts. So they want to videotape all the confessions. How many people, how many police stations around the country today have the equipment to video record confessions? How many cases are now before the courts using CCTV footage, DNA, video recorded confessions? How many? How many have you been able to arrest and charge and well, I know you didn't convict anybody from 2021 to now, but how many convictions can we look forward to? Because you see, the problem in this country is that we cannot even achieve convictions. And to add insult to injury, even if the police had probable cause when persons were arrested, some 10 years later, when persons are released from prison and they sue the state because they say that we were wrongly charged, the state can put up no defense. And somebody dropped a massive ball in the Ministry of the Attorney General. And I want to see who is going to take responsibility. Who is in charge of ensuring that litigation like this, which can cost the state millions of dollars, is effectively managed. The portfolio of civil litigation falls squarely under the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, Section 76 of the Constitution. He is vested, the highest law of the land makes him responsible. And that is why the opposition today, we are renewing our call that Faris Al-Rawi, if he, and I think by the timeline we are very clear, that he was the Attorney General in charge of civil litigation when the state failed to put in a defense in this matter. And I think we would have had to change over to Reginald Amor, Senior Counsel. Imagine a Senior Counsel who should know the importance. He should know the importance. We know our real Duncy, so perhaps he doesn't understand these things. But Senior Counsel Amor should know the importance of putting in evidence to defend. There was expert evidence, according to the newspaper reports, to support these men and their claim against the state for the treatment that they suffered in the prison and so on. And the state put in absolutely no response. They asked to be heard at the hearing, but what did you come to say? We need answers. We demand answers on behalf of the population of this country, on behalf of everybody who is being told that their, pothole cannot be repaired in front of their house, on behalf of every person who is being told that they must pay property tax because the country needs the money in order to address things, on behalf of every citizen who is suffering because you must pay more for fuel. And Ravi come on and say, well, it's because you paid more for fuel, we fixing the potholes now. You know how much pothole you could have fixed and give us a ease up on gas if we didn't have to fork out $20 million for undefended litigation? And I am asking the question today, and the members of the media, I am asking you to demand, and we will do our investigations and we will use whatever avenues are available to us. But I would like the Attorney General, the Office of the Attorney General, to make public today how many matters involving malicious prosecution have been brought against the state and damages have been awarded to persons because those matters were undefended. How many matters involving malicious prosecution have gone undefended by the Office of the Attorney General and damages are being awarded to persons who sue the state? They must make that information public, and if they refuse to do it, we will file freedom of information requests. We will file questions in the parliament. We will take them to court if we have to. We took them to court and in several matters in order to get information about legal fees being paid. And apart from malicious prosecution, I don't know if in his press conference this afternoon, Mr. Armour would like to tell us whether there are any other matters where attorneys either employed by the state or briefed by the state have failed to put in defenses, have failed to file witness statements, and as a result of that, litigation filed against the state are basically being dealt with by default, and people are being awarded damages. I am putting that question squarely to him, and I want him to answer that at 2:30 this afternoon in his press conference. He must tell the population what the Ministry of the Attorney General has been doing under his watch to ensure that matters brought against the state are properly defended, and tell us in terms of numbers how many matters have gone undefended. We understand that they may lose matters at times. I don't know if that's a competent. The High Court to set aside that arbitration award. They ignored her. Mrs. Peake, who was the senior counsel who did the matter, the opinion came out into the public domain, so we've all read it. She identified all of the reasons why they should go under, I think it is Section 19 of the Arbitration Act, to challenge that decision and let the High Court decide. But you know what, OAS won the arbitration. They run to the High Court, and look, they have been supposedly successful at the first instance. I think the matter has been appealed. But how can they justify cherry picking and opinion shopping on which matters they want to pursue? Is it because of who is the Prime Minister's friend? Is it because of when it serves their political motives and end? Because then that raises the question now why they did not defend this matter involving the 9 men who were on remand for 9 years. And I make no comments on the guilt or innocence of anybody. As an attorney, I respect the judicial process, and the 9 persons were found not guilty by a jury of their peers. But as a citizen, as a taxpayer, as someone who understands the process and what law enforcement in this country does, and what they are required to do, and what lawyers do, and what prosecutors do, and what civil attorneys are supposed to do, I find it extremely troubling that we as a country must stomach the fact that the real perpetrators may or may not be walking free, And on top of that, $20 million would have to be spent now to compensate people. And I read today comments from one of them saying that no amount of money could compensate them and so on. And that raises a host of other questions and concerns with the judicial system and the length of time, and whether people who are in fact innocent are being deprived of a decade of their life while they await trial. But why do we, when we have a government that is in control of the treasury, why do we have to foot the bills for their incompetence? Somebody dropped the ball somewhere. Did it start with the investigation? Did it continue the prosecution? Or did it happen only towards the end here when the civil matter was filed against the state? How many slip-ups and mock-ups have we had along the way in the management of this one matter? And it raises the question about other matters as well. Can any person whose family, whose child, whose parent is a victim of crime in this country feel that they will ever get justice when they read about these things in the newspapers? Quite frankly, I think no. You cannot feel any sense of comfort and confidence. The management of litigation seems to have been the furthest thing from the mind of Al-Rawi and his successor. Instead, what you had under this PNM administration is they tried to overstep their bounds. And I can give you 3 examples where they were overstepping their bounds. Instead of managing what falls under your purview in the Ministry of the Attorney General, you were trying to control the office of the DPP and tread on his territory. You issuing indemnity to Vincent Nelson, unbeknownst to the DPP, who is the only person with authority to engage in the plea bargaining process. We found out via a court matter that unbeknownst to the DPP, the Office of the Attorney General and some unit they formed called Criminal Justice Unit or something like that. Why does the Office of the Attorney General have a Criminal Justice Unit? You have a legislative department to deal with laws, and you have an Office of the DPP to deal with crime. But they have a Criminal Justice Unit issuing opinions to the TTPS on whether or not someone in the TTPS should be charged when the Coast Guard or TTPS somebody intercept them on a vessel and they are found in possession of firearms and so on. The news don't report on these things, but that is a serious, fundamental overstep and encroachment on the constitutional remit of the office of the DPP. That is misbehavior in public office when an Attorney General allows his staff or authorizes people in his ministry to interfere with police investigations. That is the track record of Al-Rawi, interfering in the Vincent Nelson investigation. Interfering in that investigation where the a member an attorney hired by the TTPS was arrested. Do you remember the Ocean Pelican as well? The man went right up in and he picked up the phone according to the newspapers and called the police station because the son of a minister was arrested, and he called the police station allegedly to give his interpretation of the regulations to the police. So Al-Rawi couldn't make sure that people suing the state, when people sue the state for $20 million, that he make sure that his staff put in a defense to make sure that the state properly defend these matters. But he busy writing opinion, he busy drafting indemnity, he busy calling police station and interfering in things that do not concern him. He want to be the commissioner of police. That is what he was busy doing while the state was failing to put in defenses in these very important matters. Where a woman who, by all accounts, was an upstanding citizen and a businesswoman and somebody contributing to the development of this country was murdered, and her family will never get justice. Why? Because of absolute incompetence of this PNM administration. On the point of them completely giving up, I want to say, and I want to take note of something that MP Charles touched upon, and which we dealt with yesterday in the Parliament, or tried to deal with, and that is the prevalence of defense force police and other arms of law enforcement, paraphernalia and ammunition being found at crime scenes in this country and being used in the commission of offences. I do not know how any citizen, when you are being given assurances like this is the storm before the calm and so on, and you are being told that the state is working, but the people who have the mandate to protect you are apparently complicit in the commission of offences. We do not know if the next bullet coming behind any one of us is going to come from the Defence Force or the TTPS. The matter was raised in the Parliament yesterday by Senator Mark, calling on the government to have an inquiry. Do you know that in response, this abject, complete disgrace and failure of our minister called Fitzgerald Hines, he has been moved to about 3 or 4 different ministries now, and everywhere he has been a failure. His only saving grace is that he's consistent in terms of being a failure. Consistency is his sole saving grace, I think, because no matter what they do with him, he fails. And he being the person to take action and to do something about it, responded to Senator Mark. He spoke and spoke and spoke and said a whole lot of nothing, but ended by saying that he did not think any inquiry was necessary. So, since the government have all but abandoned the citizens of this country, they have abandoned their duties, for everything that happens, they search for a scapegoat, which I'm sure it is now 12:04, they're probably close to finding somebody to blame at 2:30 today for their failures. And we as the opposition committed. We are also very bothered by what happens. We are also living in fear. We also feel like, the situation is hopeless, but we are not giving up. This morning, I penned a letter to the chairman of the Joint Select Committee on National Security, co-signed by the member from the House who sits on that committee with me, Dr. Munilal. I have identified in the letter, within the last 6 months, and I can show you here today, I've identified a number of instances involving supposed either complicity, illegal importation of uniforms, blue lights, and so on, but things that fall within the remit of law enforcement. And I'm asking that an urgent sitting of the Joint Select Committee on National Security be convened to deal with this matter and to examine what is wrong. Hines don't want to do it? Well, okay, we can't depend on him for nothing. As I say, as far as he is concerned, he has adopted, I think, the mantra of his leader, who dead, who live, and that's how they are happy to go along, hoping that Carnival will perhaps create a distraction for them from all what is happening around us. But I can tell you, the reports are, and from people who are, patrons and so on, that it is not, all is not well. Because even this promised mother of all carnivals, people are fearful. People are scared to attend events. People are scared. There was a time when the crowds spilling out onto the streets outside of Panyards was a sight to behold in this country. And people are not going to do it. And why? Because of headlines like these. And I will show you, and this is just in the last 6 months, and this is just a brief scan of the news that I did this morning. Bandits in police uniform rob central businessman. Fake police rob drivers of truck carrying alcohol. Regiment bullet found at Tunapuna Market crime scene. Fake cops kill man in Arima. This is from January earlier this year. Subsequent to this incident, there was an editorial, I think, in the Express calling for action. No response from the ministry, nothing. And so it continued. Regiment bullets found on 5th crime scene as woman shot. And a couple of days ago, 6 days ago, spent shell with TTPS markings found at murder scene. Where are we going as a country when at the source, at the commission of the offense, we cannot have faith and confidence in the state and their ability to... How can we think for a moment that they can keep us safe and prevent crime when a few, and I am not casting aspersions on all of our law enforcement officers, I know many of them and they are very good and committed officers, trying their best. But if there are a few bad apples in the barrel, and this is what we are getting as a result, don't you think the time has come for action to be taken on this matter? Don't you think that this warrants an inquiry? Well, Fitzgerald Hines stood in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago yesterday in response to the opposition and said no. So today, the Secretary of the Committee has already acknowledged receipt of my letter, and I will be happy to share a copy of this letter with members of the media if they wish. But it is painfully obvious that we have a low detection rate, that there may be persons in law enforcement or customs or somewhere that is complicit in the commission of crimes, and that nothing will change for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago unless we tackle the issue, this issue of ammunition, uniforms, even blue lights, siren, vehicles, and so on being used in the commission of offences. Because these are the people we are looking to keep us safe initially, and as I have painstakingly gone through the process and the system today, all other arms of the state seem to be falling down, from detection, prosecution, conviction, and even some 10 years later in defending civil actions against the state stemming from criminal activity and alleged criminal activity. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are in a very, very bad place as a country. I repeat that Fitzgerald Hines, Stuart Young, he wants to one, I don't know who he investigated. The two people who he should be investigating are sitting, I think, to the right and left of him, which is Amor and Al-Rawi, but he wants to investigate. Al-Rawi and Amor are totally unfit to hold office, and they have proven this not just on this instance, but time and time again with Nelson Gate, with the Miami scandal, fiasco. They cannot be the people who represent this country before any court, before any judicial officer, and in any legal proceedings. And it is clear that they are not interested or that they are incapable of managing the portfolio assigned to them. So we call upon the Prime Minister to do what is right and to give this country an Attorney General that we can have some faith and confidence in. Maybe third time will be the charm, I don't know. But you need to go in hunt of somebody who is more capable of managing the legal affairs. It is a very important role and function as Attorney General. And you cannot continue to subject this country to this level of incompetence from such an important office. I think that, I don't know if there's anything that MP Charles wants to add, or we can take questions coming from members of the media. Or the public.
Yeah, we just have a couple of questions coming in. Senator Lutchmedial, are you surprised that the Prime Minister said he is waiting to hear what the AG has to say, how he will explain this fiasco?
No, I'm not surprised, because waiting seems to be what the Prime Minister does best. He's waiting until March to have a conversation on crime. He's waiting to hear the explanation. Well, like everyone else, we are all waiting to hear the explanation. As I said, I think they have been on a manhunt for a scapegoat since yesterday, and so we are waiting. At the end of the day, I don't know what he needs to wait and hear, because the buck stops with your cabinet and the person that you have put in charge of the management of the legal affairs of the state. If what more do you need to hear? That is the question that we need to find out right now. So I'm not surprised, because he has a way of dismissing important things and critical things in this type of manner. While I'm waiting to hear and I'm waiting on a report. I think MP Charles went through a whole list of reports. We're waiting on Coast Guard shooting, many other reports, and nothing comes out of reports. So that's just a way of deflecting and distracting, and so we are not surprised by that.
Now, a lot of people may not be very clear on the seriousness of this matter. What would you say to them as far as why is this matter so serious?
It is serious because every matter brought by a citizen, whether they are right or they are wrong, if they feel that they have been unfairly treated by the state, if they feel that some wrong has been done to them, a civil wrong, whether it is negligence, whether it is malicious prosecution, whether it is unfair dismissal, as we saw with the Jawala Ramran matter and others, whether their constitutional right to privacy, respect for their religious belief, whatever it is being infringed by the state, every single matter that any citizen would have has to be brought against the state and has to be defended in the name of the Attorney General. And if a matter this important can simply escape them, and a matter involving this amount of money being claimed by so many litigants can escape them, then I really do fear for the future of the state as a body, as an entity that is tasked with representing the citizens of this country. Remember, at the end of the day, you have one citizen saying, you, the state, you have offended me, you have done something wrong to me, and I want you, not you, Arawi or Amor or Rowley, but the citizens of the country must now compensate me for that loss. So if they cannot manage these big matters and give it the attention that it deserves, then what is going to happen to the numerous other matters? And that is why I am repeating again today, they must come now and tell us how many other matters, because not every matter that passes through the court would be reported in the newspaper and make a front page like this one. This one is scandalous and atrocious. So the media pick up on it and they put it in the front page. But I want a list of matters where no defense or no witness statements were filed. Not just for malicious prosecution, for all the other matters brought by persons against the state. Whether it is the police wrongfully arresting them, or false imprisonment, or some negligence against a member of the state, or unfair dismissal. I don't know, are there matters where people are alleging that they are unfairly dismissed and the attorneys hired by the state or briefed by the state are not putting in evidence, and that those matters will not be defended? AMO must come today and tell us about them. And tell us what is the risk exposure. That's what it is, It's a risk exposure for the taxpayer to have to foot all these bills in addition to footing the hefty legal bills for the friends and family and finances of the PNM. Job, big briefs for the boys. Big briefs for the boys. But we are not seeing the fruit of that labor or any sort of benefit to the taxpayers who now have to turn around and pay damages when the state doesn't defend matters like this. We are losing on both sides. I also just want to say that this matter raises another issue which is not connected to the $20 million award, but it raises the issue of the state's ability to convict people on evidence. And that is why I raise the issue of the evidence, the promised evidence amendment bill. I have raised the issue of resourcing for the TTPS to be able to do their job, and the office of the DPP, which has been severely understaffed for a very long time, but I think it is getting worse. For some 2 years, I think it is only this month they put out a notice in the newspaper that they have moved into new premises, which is supposed to give them the space to hire more staff and expand. But just before the election in 2020, Arawi pulls up with keys and say that, oh, we have brand spanking new offices for the DPP's office, and this will address the shortage of staff members. That is the Port of Spain office. The San Fernando office, same thing. Every year they had money allocated in the budget. This month I think they are trying to move. When are they going to get the staff? And when are you going to occupy the brand new Port of Spain office that you posed up with just on, I think it was in July of 2020 before the election, saying that you are now giving them office space to address the shortage of staff in the office of the DPP, which is severely understaffed. And which, I'm not saying that the officers are not doing their jobs, but you cannot get blood out of stone. So if you are not giving the people the resources that they need, whether it is the DPP or the TTPS, this is what will happen. They quarrel with the opposition and they say all kind of things about us and how we advocating for bail and so on. Do you know that if the Akili Charles matter had been determined sooner, and any of these men had been out on bail, awaiting trial, and the government had invested some of the money in electronic monitoring bracelets and a proper system of parole and all of those things through the social services, that the award that they were given by the master in this matter would have been significantly less. That is foresight, and that is vision, and that is the proper management of a criminal justice system. That you do not keep people behind bars for 10 years with a law that says they cannot get bail, only for them to be released because you cannot convict them, and then they sue the state for $20 million and they get it because you cannot defend it. That is just a multiplicity of failures, and we as an opposition with no power, no resources, no access to the treasury, we are making a difference. We are making a difference when we call for bail reform. Because if you had taken on board our suggestions and done some proper bail reform and outfitted the electronic monitoring unit properly, when they were trying to stop the bail act, the bail decision, pending the Privy Council decision, the head of that electronic monitoring unit came out and said, he don't have enough bracelets, he don't have staff, he don't have resources. He filed an affidavit in the court to say that. So what are you doing apart from throwing your hands up in the air? You are not tackling this matter in a strategic and holistic way to really treat with the issues. But you will quarrel with the opposition because we say people should get bail. I am showing you today how the opposition's position on bail and our advocacy for proper management and bail reform could help save the state money. Because you would not have people waiting 9 years in horrendous conditions in remand yard and then being able to sue the state that you cannot defend and get money from the taxpayer.
Now, this matter came to light while Minister Stuart Young was acting as Attorney General, and he announced that there would be an investigation into it. Do you think anything will come of that investigation?
Well, as I said before, I think they're on a manhunt for a scapegoat. We have seen so many. I think Nelson Gates is the biggest scandal we have ever seen in this country. And has anything come out of it? You had an Attorney General completely stepping out of the bounds of his office, interfering with a police investigation, holding out the promise of a presidential pardon, cutting a deal with somebody and giving them millions of dollars in settlement of a civil claim in exchange for a statement. And we have seen absolutely nothing done. I don't know what it is that it will take. Al-Wari himself might have to take a gun and kill somebody before Rowley removes him. I don't know what grip he has on the Prime Minister, that he seems to have cemented himself in some seat. They have to make a ministry for Al-Wari. They seem to be content to do it. Because I have never seen a scandal bigger than Nelson Gates. And no one has faced any consequence to date. So I am not very hopeful. I don't know if MP Charles wants to add anything to that.
My concern is that the Prime Minister tells us that, and the Guardian, Prime Minister disturbed over lack of defense in case. The Newsday is telling us Prime Minister concerned over 20 million compensation. Express is telling us Prime Minister disturbed by the judgment. I'm guaranteeing you that this afternoon no minister will be held accountable, even though by law they are responsible for all that goes on in their ministry. They have control, according to the Constitution, over the goings on in the ministry. They exercise control. It seems as if, given what we know so far, and subject to what they say at 2:30, it's 2 o'clock this afternoon, either Reginald Amor or Faris Al-Wari either one of them has to be fired. But Dr. Rowley is very skillful at protecting. We see it in Darrell Smith, we see it in he protects rather, and his job is to protect us, the citizens. $20 million could fix every landslip in Naparima constituency. Every landslip. So Dr. Rowley is abdicating his leadership and prime ministerial responsibility to hold his cabinet ministers accountable for malfeasance, incompetence, ineptitude in their portfolios.
You know, I want to say something that the PNM, when they were in opposition, used to make a big rah every Monday morning about this one must go, that one must go. Then they continuously speak about, ministers being changed and fired and so on under the cabinet of Kamala predecessor. I'll tell you something. No way, no how. I heard the minister and the Ministry of the Attorney General talking about data protection yesterday, brain down the parliament about what all they do from 2012, 2015, what all they do. I'll tell you what we never did. We never allowed citizens under the watch of Kamala predecessor. The citizens of this country could never wake up and see a headline like this, where the state fails to defend matters in the court and no heads would rule, and that nobody would be held to account. And that is the difference in leadership. That is a significant difference in leadership. As M. Charles so eloquently put it, he has abdicated his responsibility to seek the interests of the people who put him there and who elected him to protect us, and instead all he seeks to do is protect his little inner circle and his cabinet. Apart from them, nobody is safe in this country, because they are the only ones enjoying protection of the Prime Minister at this point in time.
And I guarantee you, no minister will be held accountable today, tomorrow, or next year for incidents like these. We are being run by a group of miscreants, obscurantist politicians, and benighted idiots. And Trinidad and Tobago, we are heading down the abyss, and that will be the responsibility. And the last point I would like to make is that people in Trinidad, and particularly swing voters and whatnot, want the luxury of abdicating their responsibilities when it comes to voting and holding the opposition accountable. Well, every Trinidadian has to stand up and be counted at this point in time. Every Trinidadian. And I talk all the chambers of commerce, the IRO, we could speak to over the trade unions, we speak to the powerful ladies of Trinidad and Tobago, and the Calypsonians. The Calypsonians have been bought out. My taxpayers' money being used to pay Calypsonians to insult me when I go to the tent. And I want to ask the question today. How much money, taxpayers' money, has been paid to the tent that operates in Palms Club that reports indicate told Lady Gypsy, that she cannot sing a particular song. You cannot use my taxpayers' money to insult me. But that is the PNM's approach to government. Insult, deny us representation, give us poor governance, and then turn around and insult us. It is for us, the citizens, all of us, to stand up and be counted at this time.
Yes, and I will add to that, use the taxpayers' dollars to buy people out to prop up what is weak, incompetent, and ineffective leadership, because that is what it comes down to. And that is why I raised the difference between what would have happened under a partnership administration or a UNC administration in the past, because the buck stops with the Prime Minister. And no amount of money that he spends to buy out the validating elites, as we call them, who will come out and make excuses for him and his band of misfits and miscreants for a little contract and a little liter food and a brief. No amount of money spent on those things will convince the population that you have anything else to offer after 7.5 years of hardship and suffering and absolute and living in fear for their lives. So all of those persons identified by MP Charles should take a very good look around them as what is happening.
Will you sell your soul and will you sell your children's patrimony for a contract, a VAT payment, a brief with the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago? Oh God, think about our future, not your immediate gratification. So there is a challenge that both of us wish to put out to Trinidad and Tobago and our independent institution. Put country before brief and before your financial short-term gain from a corrupt group of miscreants who are wasting our patrimony at this time.
I have no more questions. We have no more questions.
Good.
Thank you.
Are you ready to feel the beat of soca? Are you ready to feel the beat of chutney?
I can feel the spirit. It calling me. The spirit calling me.
One stage unites the spirit of Carnival. Saturday, 4th February. One people, one beat, one night. I love Joker. Come feel the beats.
Just when we drinking, rough when we whining. When we start to drink, we get fiery. Like thunder we rolling, from night till the morning. So they can't talk to we. Are you ready to party? Are you ready to fete like this? Raise up your cups and your glasses. If you think you could drink like me, meet me by the bar, cause we taking shots. Middle of the fete, everybody just taking shots. Link up with me, everybody come take a shot. Middle of the stage, there's only ladies and shots. Yeah, so take a shot. Whoa.
I hear what chutney steam. I hear what chutney steam. Brandon Center, you ready for the tempo? I hear what chutney steam. I hear what chutney steam. Don't stop. Chop your back, call your wine so unique. Take charge, so I love it how you roll with the beat. Love it how you roll with the beat. Roll with the beat. Chop your back, call your wine so unique. Take charge, so I love it how you roll with the beat. Love it how you roll.